order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Approval of the board minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Tabitha, are there any additions, deletions to the agenda?
Nope, I handed out the current ones.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Our next item is Carol and Community Development. Good morning, Carol. You just want to take a chair. The third one would be the answer for you today. Nope, that's first. Second, third. There you go.
I can count to three.
It's the other three, Carol.
It's the other
It's
three.
the other three that are difficult.
Depends which way you're
That's-
walking. You know.
I'm going
Exactly.
to give you, I made some handouts.
Sure.
Yes. How embarrassing.
We'll blame it on Randy. When that happens,
All
just
right,
say, Randy,
can you
shut
hear
your
me now
phone
through
off.
this
Yep.
mic? Okay.
And good morning, Carol.
Good morning.
Morning, Carol.
What I'm here to talk about are opportunity zones. And this is something that was passed in the tax bill in the wee hours. So it's a federal program. It was passed in December. We don't know too many things about it, except that it's very similar to new market tax credits. And how new markets tax credits work is when there are corporations or individuals that have a capital gains expense, they can reduce that expense if they put the funds they got from that caused the capital gain into a new markets tax credit fund or an opportunity fund. If they and then that fund then invests things in, like, say, housing projects or manufacturing type buildings or parks, then after 10 years, they only pay like 85% instead of 100% of what their capital gains would be. So somebody got the bright idea to do opportunity zones. New markets tax credit zones were very small, and we really couldn't use them, and they're based on, as is the opportunity zones, the census tracts and what the unemployment rate and the median income level and the poverty rate is within that zone. So the idea is to target these areas for investment. The problem with them is they're kind of goofy zones, if you ask me. If you can look at the map, you see Morrison County would have three that could be designated. One is north of Pierce to the county line. Pierce isn't in it. And then you go all the way east to the Mille Lacs County line. One is in Little Falls, kind of around the east side, wrapping around to the south side of Little Falls, not the west side. And the third one goes north of Randall, right up into the city of Motley. And, you know, the one thing, like with Little Falls I looked at, and I can figure out why that area is the way it is because if you're looking at low income or poverty rate, you have the nursing homes there. And you also have the convent there. So, you know, there's less income there. There are poorer people living there. So, to step back again to the opportunity zones, we have those zones. The governor, we have in the state 509 low-income census tracts. 3 have been identified in Morrison County that could be included. The governor has to choose 128, and when he designates them, then that's the zones that it goes to the IRS, and that's the zone that development could occur in. So they're asking us, out of those 3 that you see there, which would be your first priority, second priority, third priority. And I looked at them, and it's also, where do you think development most likely will occur? I designated Zone 1, the first choice, to be the Little Falls one, the little one. Second would be the one over north of Piers. And then the third one would be the one that goes from Motley to just about to Randall. Looking at where do we think housing development or something might happen. Okay? Now, the key to this is all we need is for you to designate the zones today. This won't happen, we won't get any funding unless there is an opportunity fund. And the opportunity fund is where all the money from these companies would come into, and then it has to be reported back to the IRS. The state doesn't want anything to do with setting up any of these funds. They looked at the initiative foundations. The initiative foundation says, we don't want anything to do with setting up these funds. The reason is, number one, how do you know where these wealthy companies are? Many of them would probably be on Wall Street. But number two, you have to have a massive infrastructure of software and accounting software in order to report to the IRS once or twice a year how many times it's required. And they don't have the rules out yet. That won't come out until 2019. Having said that, there are two organizations. One is in the cities, and one is up in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, called MMCDC, Midwest Minnesota Community Development Corporation. They have done new markets tax credits for about 40 years. They have all that infrastructure right there. I talked to the president of that group, and he said that they are planning on being an opportunity fund. And I said, would you be able to come then? And if this happens, would you be able to do an opportunity fund and include Morrison County, Region 5, whatever counties want to be involved with it? And he said, yes, he'd be willing to have that conversation. They work all over the state anyhow. So if it wasn't for that phone call, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And so what I'm asking you to do is if you would approve of those zone designations, then we're in. But if a fund doesn't appear, then it's all for naught, but it didn't really cost us anything. There's no fees to be part of this. You won't have any, there won't be any financial impact, to your budget by doing this.
Mr. Chairman, but it's not just the fund management folks that would need to exist, it's the investors also
Yes.
that would need to exist.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
hold on.
Yes, and with new markets tax credits, MMCDC has all those investors because they've been doing it for 40 years. They know who they are. There are a lot of large banks and very wealthy people that have large capital gains implications. So, and this is a nationwide program, but if things don't work out with MMCDC, we wouldn't have a fund. I don't see this thing going anywhere. It's ideally, I think, for housing projects would be, one of the things, but they do manufacturing buildings and help with the funding of those. MMCDC has quite a bit of money that they can also put into projects, so I think they would be a good partner with us. If
Carol, what exactly are you asking from
Okay.
us today?
Okay. As in this, there was a ranking. What's your first preference? Of the three, which one should be ranked number 1, which one ranked 2, and which one ranked 3?
Okay.
I put it in here. You can change it if you want. But if you see on the map I gave you, zone number 1, okay, would be the one around Little Falls. The little bitty squiggly one on the southern part of that map. Zone number 2 would be the one that goes north of Piers to the Crow Wing County line and then east to Mille Lacs County line. And the number 3rd ranked would be the one on kind of the western part of the county that goes from just north of Randall up into Motley. And that's all I'm asking you today, to designate 1, 2, 3.
So if we, by resolution, by motion,
By motion would designate that, that's what goes into, for lack of a better term, the bucket, that then the governor needs to take a look at and define throughout the state. And then this option would be there. It's a tax program. It's a tax deferred or tax capital gain type of program for large investors as well.
and does this tie the county into anything?
No. All it does is designate. You know,
Doesn't
we're-
say we will do anything, it doesn't say we won't do anything, it simply,
a rank-
period,
yep, a
designates.
ranking. Yep,
And it's a geographically based capital program.
that's exactly
So
right.
that geography has to be defined by the state. That geography has to be defined by the state, then to be able to be eligible ultimately for investors to participate.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Carol, you said the rules weren't out yet on how this program works. If for some reason the rules came out and we didn't like them,
Then I would say, then you could say, we don't want to participate in this program.
But do you know, or don't you, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, do you know we can at that time say no? Or don't you know for sure?
I don't know for sure. I would assume that you could.
There's a lot of steps that are involved yet for this to occur. It's just, these are the areas that, based on the information that Carol has in the parameters of the program, from when I initially looked at it, there were some qualifiers, and that's why certain areas were designated and certain areas weren't.
Right.
And then it's up to the governor, it's up to the whole state to define where those opportunity zones could potentially lie, and then the investors would need to invest in those and develop in order
So-
to be able to get the capital advantage.
Mr. Chair, Carol, what I'm understanding, when it says employment and economic development, but you're saying it's more for low-income housing? Is that what you're kind of saying?
What I'm kind of saying is, number one, the one thing we know for sure, they don't have the rules for the opportunity funds designed yet, and they won't have those till 2019. Looking back on how New Market's tax credits work, they kind of work the best for housing, low-income housing, and for manufacturing. Those are the two things. Now, when they come out with the rules next year, it could be for anything. Could be for a circus, as far as I know, but nobody knows what those rules are yet. They're just asking, here are the areas, if this thing happens, your priorities.
So they've done this before throughout this?
Well, not with an opportunity zone. They've done it before with New Markets tax credits, okay? New Markets tax, when I looked at how this is set up, it's set up very similar, only they've made the areas much bigger for what you can do a project in. With New Markets tax credits, honestly, you could look in the city of Piers, and you could have one tract of land with one house on it be designated for development, and across the street, nothing. So that was, it was prohibitive that way. This just makes the areas bigger by what I can see without the final rules being put out.
Trying to liken it a little to a program that we have in like a TIF district. What it's not the same rules, but it's tax advantaged ways for development to occur. So it's another program like that on a much broader scale. Oftentimes when Carol mentioned it's economic or job development type of basis, housing often aligns directly with that you need housing for people to be able to work in different areas and things of that nature. So oftentimes it's aligned with that, but I'm just trying to think of it's a program, a tax advantage type of program for investors.
It's kind of like the Angels tax credit almost, isn't it?
No, because an angel tax credit, you can go work with a business and it doesn't make any difference where that business is located. you know?
Similar type of investment though.
It's an investment, yes, and this is for companies and people that have large capital gains tax implications. They're saying, you know, you can put your money to work here for 10 years and only pay 85% instead of 100%. Yeah, so.
Yeah, they're all different nuances with tax advantage things, you're right, yeah.
I'm just a little bit concerned that we're not going to necessarily be tied into anything. And I don't know that we know that for sure, so I have to ask this question. Do we need to know the answer do you need to know the answer today?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, it's not tying the county into anything, just defining if this program goes forward and if all of the opportunities or the parameters are determined, these are the areas that it would apply to. And it's not county related. There's nothing that would come to the county unless it would be normal development type of questions with maybe a building issue or something along those lines. But we have those rules already set for if there was a building to go up somewhere that needed to be permitted or something like that. But not really a question that comes to the county otherwise in terms of how this program and the tax credits work.
And every county, well, I shouldn't say every county in the state, some counties are wealthy enough that they don't have any.
Yeah.
Some may have just some, you know, maybe Duluth or Minneapolis may have pockets, you know, but everybody is being asked to designate and prioritize the ones that are there, you know, so I know Todd County's doing the same thing, Cass, Crow Wing, and then I talked to Cheryl Hills. I said, let's put together, once these things are designated, a meeting with MMCDC to, you know, support them, to get them to use, you know, be able to cover us in this area with investments. So do I think this is, you know, I mean, this is like a 25, 75% chance that we're going to see something at the end of the line. It's a very difficult program.
But not initiating or identifying those zones takes you out of the question for sure.
Yes.
Where it happened. I had a kind of a large regional administrators meeting on Friday, and we were talking about it, and everybody was kind of in the same boat that, boy, don't know for sure if it's going to happen, but yet this is the first step in order to allow that opportunity to exist if it does happen. And so why wouldn't we designate areas that are defined that could potentially be eligible for the program to exist in our county?
So I would ask the attorney, who happens to be present with us today, Brian, we're talking about designating areas, period, I believe.
Yeah.
Is this something that would be A-okay to do?
As far as I know, I haven't had a personal opportunity to review the program, but,
There's very little details out to review.
and that's probably why.
I guess our question would be, if we don't do it, then we never qualify for it.
Is that correct?
Yeah. So if we do it, we'd be able to see what comes up down the road. Like I say, I think there's a lot of stretch marks here on what will happen, but we will not get any of those investor funds if we don't do it.
And if something came up down the road and we looked at it in more than one day or in one 20-minute period, we could say absolutely no.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think on your, what you're suggesting, that if it comes back to us, and I'm hoping this is correct, if they say, well, you know what, to be part of this program, the county has to participate so many dollars, then I'm hoping that we can say no or yes to that.
And, right, and typically what happens, I think, with the new markets tax credits, say there's a company that wants to build a manufacturing plant and it's in the zone, and they get cheaper interest rates is what it is. They're going to come to community development and they're going to say, hey, do you have a loan fund that you can help with, you know, the project or the initiative foundation? And we can all then come in and participate in that project that way. It wouldn't be anything coming out of your county budget proceeds.
It's for development of investments into structure, into buildings, into that stuff coming through a different avenue than a county investment. You know, it's not meant to be that, I guess.
And what they're looking at is they want to put investment into areas that have low median family income, high employment, that kind of thing. Now, if you look at the map, let's say the map on the eastern side, north of Pierce, okay? And then what communities are there? Lastra, Harding, Hillman. Is a big manufacturing company going to come in there? Do they have the infrastructure there to handle it? But would a housing project come in there? Low to moderate. That's what I'm looking at. Looking up at Motley, it looks like most of Motley is in it. They have an industrial park that would be there. That might be a place where somebody will come in. I mean, you're asking me to look in the future. I'm just saying, by what I know now, and the way the new markets tax credit program worked, which this is modeled after, that would be my guess.
So, gentlemen, I would look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept this.
Second.
So we've got a motion on the table and a second to make Morrison County, or to designate Morrison County as a...
No.
To designate
To rank.
opportunity zones.
Yeah, to rank. Number 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
As presented here as opportunity zones.
Okay. And that's the motion, and that is the second? Is that correct? Further discussion?
We have an area north of Pierce up on the county line where there's a dog food business, and that's built out in the middle of nowhere, and they hire probably 30 to 50 people.
Yep.
There's lots of cars around there all the time. And I think what this program does, it designates an area that if investors want to come in and invest in that area, they'll get a tax credit for that. And I could see where that could happen, but there's a lot of questions that need to be answered along the way. But if we do not do this, we don't have that opportunity even.
Yep. I agree with that.
And again, moving forward, I'd like to see it too, but I just don't want to make sure that and again, I'm hoping that the state won't hold us to anything if we have.
Well, they're not going to hold us to anything because we're not making a motion here for any financial anything.
Yep.
And actually, this is a federal program. The state and the governor has to designate the zones, but this all runs through the IRS. This is a federal program.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? That motion passes. Carol, thank you.
Thank you. One other quick thing, just a heads up. I met with a business yesterday that wants to construct building about $500,000 worth of an investment. It's in the western part of the county, and he doesn't want me giving out his name right now, but it's in the township. He needs tax increment financing. We've done them before in townships, running them through the Rural Development Finance Authority, and I think then it comes to the county board for approval too. I'll be working with them and David Drown to get that set up. So just a heads up, you'll be seeing me in a couple of months with another project.
More to come.
More to come.
Excellent. Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you.
Thank you very kindly. Karen, Great River Arts.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, and for the purpose of everyone, if you would introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Karen Punsack. I'm Executive Director for Great River Regional Library.
And I'm Grace Heschke, the Library Service Coordinator for the Pierce Library.
So we're here to tell you the story of library services over 2017. I've been with Great River for 19 years. When I started, our computers didn't need a mouse to run, and the cell phones didn't really fit in your pocket. Texting was something you really hadn't heard of, and our website was new. So a lot has changed in the 19 years that I've been at the system, but one thing that hasn't changed is we're dedicated to making sure that we're providing opportunities for literacy, access, and lifelong learning in all 32 communities that we serve. go ahead and turn the.
Karen, you
slide.
just give me the sign of something.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So we have about a third to a quarter of the population has used their library card at least once in the last 3 years to check out books. We have 5 libraries here in Morrison County. It's a very strong library county because of the number of locations. Little Falls is by far the largest location. And most of the other libraries are open 20 to 23 hours a week, but they are very heavily used. And Grace works in Piers, and that's one of our highest performing libraries in the small library category.
I was going to mention with the checkouts and the visits at the Piers Library, I visit the 1st through the 3rd grade in May. Actually, they visit me, I should say, and I promote the summer reading program. Also, the early childhood, I visit them 4 times throughout the school year, and then that adds new families to our card holders. And also Head Start is a new program in Piers, and I've been visiting with them too. So we are having lots of new library patrons and families.
In your packet, we also included the breakout of statistics for borrowers by library, the summer reading program registrations by library, and the circulation stats. It's probably further down in the packet itself. I just wanted to point out, I did inadvertently switch the 2 total columns on 17 and 18. So there was a total reduction in number of borrowers last year. That's something we've been looking into because we have been seeing a decrease in the total number of borrowers. On a regional level, that does vary quite a bit from library to library. As you can see, Royalton had a pretty substantial increase in borrowers last year due to a stronger partnership with the schools. So that's something we're digging into. The checkout statistics are up there on the screen. One of the myths that we're trying to dispel is that ebooks are taking over the library world. Yes, ebooks are a growing area of business, but right now we're only checking out about 6% of our total circulation in ebook materials. And so we have to balance the number of people coming in to use the library for physical books with those who are actually looking for digital access. And digital access is generally a little more expensive way to deliver the service overall. So one of the things that you might not know is on a national level, about 74% of the population of Americans last year read a book last year. 63% of them read a physical book, not an ebook. So it is an area of business we're watching very closely because it is an area of growth. But we have seen that flatten out over the last couple of years, and we're not really sure if that will increase. We did add an additional platform this year called Access 360, which was developed with the National Federation of the Blind, so it's a little easier to use than our Overdrive platform, and we used fund development donations to get that off the ground. So it's something we're hoping that will increase our digital access and still be affordable long-term. The other area of business that's really changed over time is the way people come and use public technology at the library. We are seeing an increase in the number of people coming with their own device. So you can see over the last 5 years, the blue bars are the number of people coming to use wireless services, and the red bars are the number of people logging into a computer in the library itself. And those are getting closer and closer together. This presents a challenge for our staff because now the platform that they're trying to help a patron with might be different from one day to the next. You might be working with someone with an iPad one day and their laptop the next day and a Chromebook the next day. So we're trying to stay ahead of that by making sure all of our public service staff are able to answer just basic technology questions because that's an area that is continuing to grow in a high demand area over the last several years.
About the summer reading program, in Piers, I have the 1st through 3rd grade students visit this library and promote the summer reading program to them. This year, we're going to be doing things a little different. We used to give them the form in the day that the library or the summer reading program started, and then they had to come back to the library. This year, I'm going to be giving it to them when they visit So I'm not going to lose. I usually lose about 50 to 75 students who say, can I have that reading log right now to keep track of my reading? So I can see my numbers going up and my participation increasing in peers. The school also, Peers School is a wonderful school, and they also have their own summer reading program. So I have some children that think that when they belong to the program at the school, they also are part of the library program. We have lots of people in Peers that even provide us with prizes to hand out to the children, so we can sell the summer reading program more.
And we want to thank you for your support of library services. Morrison County is a strong partner. Randy Winter actually is serving as our board chair this year, and we are appreciating his time and expertise. He was just out last week helping us do an update with our auditor, so we appreciate his time. I did include in your packet 2 additional forms. One is just the year-end numbers for the regional system. You can kind of see the level of activity across the region. GRL To Go is the locker system that launched as a partnership with the city of St. Cloud or Sartell last year. It was only up 3 months, so from October until December, we had almost 350 people check out materials out of that system. There's only 44 lockers, so it's a pretty substantial project. People seem to like it, and we just added an additional delivery day with funds from the city of Sartell in order to add capacity to the system.
So, Mr. Chair, Karen, that's kind of a stopgap between building and maintaining a physical, full-staffed library to offering access a little bit more locally for those people in a much less expensive way.
Yes, I mean, it was a $90,000 investment to get the system off the ground. The lockers aren't cheap because they're not just a locker. What happens is if a patron comes up to the system and scans their library card, it pops the locker open and checks the books out.
Oh.
And so it's completely interfaced with our other libraries. And so when that happens, like Swanville knows that that item's checked out. It's very much networked with the rest of our system. The Great River Board passed it as a 3-year pilot project, so we're about a year into it because we started ordering stuff last April. And we'll see how it goes. But the city of Sartell seems to be pretty happy with it. It's in their new community center, so it's in a very nice space. And then we also have a book drop there where we're picking up materials 4 days a week where people are returning items to the community center. So we'll see how it goes and see if there's additional partners down the road. One of the other new partnerships that came up this year was the city of Elk River was interested in additional open hours. I don't know if you remember, we passed a library assessment plan a couple of years ago saying this is how many open hours you get if you have this many borrowers. And we said, we don't really have the capacity to add hours there because that's our base level of service for the number of people that we're serving in your location. The city of Elk River shifted some of the funding they had been providing for the library for programs to add an additional 3 open hours starting January this year. So we'll see how that goes. That's a 5-year agreement. The other 2 items, or the one item that I wanted to point out is the Minnesota Library Association platform. This highlights the legislative issues around libraries happening down at the state capitol. One was just, there was testimony on the bonding bill for public libraries just last week. The Friends of the Kimball Library went down there, the mayor of Kimball and one of the Friends members, to talk about their building project. In Great River right now, we have Howard Lake, Kimball, and Cold Spring pretty serious about getting a building project off the ground. Waite Park may or may not develop in the next couple of years. Those bonding funds have been used in places like Staples and St. Michael in the past, so we're hopeful that there will be dollars designated for that for the next couple of years. The other one we're keeping an eye on is the Regional Library Basic System Support Bill. This moved forward into Education Committee in both the House and the Senate last year, but was not included in the Education Omnibus Bill. This is the dollars that we receive from the state for operations. About 17% of our funding comes from that source, and we're hoping that this would be included in the supplemental budget bill so that our funding is stable and predictable. Right now, we don't know how much we're going to receive until August, and we set our budget in July. So this would really help us have a more stable and predictable budget. And with the amount of fluctuation we're seeing in net tax capacity values by county, our funding has been fluctuating pretty wildly. One year we received $23,000 less than what we predicted, and a couple of years later we received $100,000 more. And that's something we would like to know a lot sooner. For other systems, this would be a big increase for the amount of base funding that they receive, and there are rural counties that are really struggling to keep their library services at a level that they can sustain. So if you see anything on this, just know that we're really hoping that even though this isn't a budget year, that it might be included.
Karen, I have a quick question on that. You said 17% of your funding comes from the state. How has that trended over the years?
Over time, that total amount has declined. I would say we were probably closer to 18-19% a couple of years ago, and I see over time that is likely to decrease. This last year, though, with the large fluctuation we saw, next year will probably be about the same, but I'm not sure how quickly it will hit us when that fluctuation happens. The metro area saw a pretty substantial decrease last year. So the total amount for the 12 regional systems doesn't change. So if we're receiving $100,000 more, that means some other system lost $100,000. And that's just as likely to happen to us at some point in time because we have such a mix of counties.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. The two big regional pushes we'll be doing in 2018, we are in the midst of a fund development audit. We're hoping to increase the amount of fundraising at Great River over the next several years. So we have hired Library Strategies to take a look at what we're doing and hopefully increase the amount that we are able to bring in through fundraising. We currently have a vacant position in that area, and we're looking to the consultant to see how best to fill that position and increase the amount of donations we receive to offer service. And then the other major initiative from the Great River Board is looking into library security. Safety and security is top of mind for everyone right now. Libraries are no different. And we have 4 board members from Great River assigned to a committee with staff, and we've been meeting quarterly with a member of the St. Cloud Police Department to talk about how to make our buildings safe and welcoming to everyone. Randy was on it last year, and now we have a new board member this year in his place. But it has been a good effort and appreciated greatly by staff. So thank you again for your support. If you have additional questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Gentlemen, questions, concerns?
No.
I know that Morrison County has supported libraries, has supported the regional libraries heavily. I know it's not a cheap thing, but I think that the county boards present and past and tentatively future also would support not only the children, but I got to tell you, there's a lot of adults that go to the libraries. It's not just children, but I think that we have to keep in mind that from the toddler programs to the elementary, to the middle schools, to the high schools, college level, and so on, libraries are a big thing. And I appreciate what you just got done saying about the electronic, what was it, 6%? And people are still picking up a book and reading a book, or reading a newspaper, a magazine, coming to the library and doing that. I think it's really a big deal, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. We still circulate VHS because they still check out.
Okay. Anything further?
So what was that, VHS? What is that?
Yeah.
If I make a comment, again, sitting on the board for a few years, things have changed over the last few years as far as the board goes, but again, you have to look at what the staff, what Karen does. I mean, they keep this, everything all nice and running smoothly. Yeah, we have a few setbacks occasionally, but you got to really appreciate everyone at the Great River Regional Library. They do a tremendous job.
Here, Andy.
Thank you very, very kindly. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the sheriff's report, and I see Sheriff Larson in the house. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, members of the board.
Morning, Sheriff.
Morning, Sheriff.
Do you need this? Is this your guys'?
Have a good week.
We'll see you tonight.
Yeah.
I'll try and be quick because I know we're running a little bit behind.
Take your time, Sheriff, it's okay.
3 minutes.
Okay. Before we get into the report, I just want to kind of address a few things that are kind of going on, I guess, in the county. The first thing is our Ellis training. We're still staying active with that. If you remember, we sent 2 deputies to this training in Verndale. It was a 2-day training. It was August of 2017. And Ellis stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And that's basically what we're doing is trying to be proactive in the community, teaching different schools, businesses, organizations, as far as what to do if there ever was an active shooter. And it's important because we know from statistics, usually 4 to 6 minutes, an active shooter or an active shooting is done. So the response time, if we're around the area, that's great. If law enforcement isn't around the area, it's not so great. So what we're trying to do is teach people different strategies, new strategies, kind of think outside the box as far as what to do. How do we, where to evacuate, how to get out of a building. If you're stuck in a building, thinking of new ways versus just shutting the lights off and hide, as far as maybe barricading the doors, and if you have to, how to fight back. So those are the things that we're trying to do, and we have 2 people right now from the Sheriff's Office that are certified to train. One officer from Little Falls Police Department is certified, and they're working on getting another officer certified as well. So we're working together and going to these schools and businesses.
And Mr. Chair, Sean and I have spoken and want to continue the discussion about having something at the government center with staff and utilizing the resources that we have in-house to be able to do that. So we're trying to continue to find time to make that work. And then with the building remodel project, how that best would occur logistically. So it's nice to have that in-house.
So yeah, if you hear anything about it, that's what ALICE stands for. That's what it's about. We're active in the community, so you might hear some feedback on that. And the feedback thus far has been positive. Terrence Brisk homicide case. Just an update. On March 7th, we met with investigators from the Morrison County Sheriff's Office, investigators from the BCA. We had Dr. McGee from the Ramsey County Medical Center come in. We had personnel from the Morrison County Attorney's Office, and we also brought in the FBI. So the FBI is going to be another set of eyes for us. We basically did an all-day overview of the case. We did a presentation, kind of chronological order from beginning to end, and pretty much got everybody on speed what's going on, got the FBI kind of up to date what's going on. And of course, we're going to be utilizing some of their resources as well. So that's basically just a general update. It's still a priority for our office. It'll remain a priority until the case is solved. And our guys are still very busy working on it. So give you a little update on Randall. So members of the Randall City Council came to my office, seek me out, basically said, what are some options as far as if the police department was to disband, how would you guys handle that? And so the only options we really have is if the police department did disband, really it would be either a contract we would set up, a contract for services, or it would be just continue on the way we're doing things now. Let's say there was no police department, how would we treat a different village within Morrison County? That's the way we would treat Randall. So you may hear some talk about that. Maybe there's been probably some discussions. I just wanted to update you that nothing's been finalized, but there has been some discussions regarding that.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, Sean and I spoke a little bit about this. The contract would mean like a dedicated service level versus just a response on need level of service like we have with other smaller towns that don't have police departments.
Do we still have a contract with, for, as an example, City of Upsala, Swanville, Flensburg, Sobieski, Elmdale?
No, we don't.
No.
We have no contracts at all with any
Correct.
Villages, small cities.
No.
Correct, no
And there
contracts.
isn't any type of guaranteed service level or guaranteed number of
Absolutely.
hours that would come along with some type of contract, because we don't have that
Exactly.
existing now anywhere.
So those were the 3 things I wanted to highlight, and then I'll go through this report fairly fast. You can see we got our command post, we got it stickered, decaled. The only thing right now, it's in piers, in storage, in their cold storage, or actually their heated storage, I'm sorry. We're waiting on putting some electronics in, so we're kind of coordinating through Granite Electronics. We're going to be putting in dispatch consoles and some TV monitors. And the TV monitors are basically when the dispatcher receives all the information, when you're out in the field, everything that is basically all the radio traffic, they're going to be typing. So they're going to see it, and then we're going to see it in lifetime too, as far as what communication's being broadcasted to them. So once we get all this done, our plan is to notify the board and let everybody kind of take a look to kind of see the finished product. The bottom photo is Deputy Bill Vandenhoven. He's at the Upsala School. He happened to be at the school during reading month, and they asked him to read to the kids, so I believe he's actually reading to the first graders in Upsala School in that photo. So we're
Fantastic.
still very active in our schools. As far as our criminal complaints, you'll see the number of complaints is 731. Our non-criminal complaints, 683. Criminal complaints, we had 48 with 30 cases which have been cleared and remaining still pending. Our drug investigations, I'm going to go off of, if you remember last month, I brought in Deputy Jason McDonald. And basically, the Central Minnesota Drug and Gang Task Force has their own current RMS system now. So what I'll do is just kind of read some of the cases that they've been working on. They've had multiple controlled purchases in different cities, obviously within Morrison County. They've been involved with arrests of fugitives. They've also been involved in several search warrants in neighboring counties, which have been a kind of a runoff and stemming from our own drug activity here in Morrison County, so they've been busy. Jason also presented at the Little Falls High School. There was over 400 students and staff on opioid abuse and recovery, so we've been busy doing the education portion as well. Moving on, our 2-year comparison, there should be a chart. You can see the total number of complaints went down a little bit. Our criminal complaints also went down. Our drug investigations went up just a little bit, and our total inmates went up from 171 to 154 in the 2-year comparison. Our criminal complaints, I'll just kind of highlight the biggest ones that we're dealing with. We have the burglaries, we have 8 of them. 7 of them were a residence, 1 was a business. We had 9 disturbing the peace. That's everything from harassing phone calls to disorderly conduct to stalking complaints. And then the green shaded left bottom quadrant, 19%, that's our thefts. We had 14 thefts, and out of those thefts, I don't know if you remember hearing, we did a news release. The city of Bolus had multiple vehicles that were gone through by suspects. They were looking for whether it was loose change or any valuables that were in plain view. If the vehicles were unlocked, these thieves were going in and stealing that stuff. So from Bolus alone, there was 5 vehicles that they had a theft complaint on, 5 separate vehicles that these thieves were stealing from. So that's why the number's so large there. Moving on to our traffic complaints. There was 12 citations issued for speed, 128 verbal warnings, and 27 written warnings. And that was kind of the highlight out of the 188 total traffic citations.
Mr. Chair, Sheriff, this probably doesn't pertain to you, but this question was asked to me, why Highway 27 from Little Falls to Piers is 60 miles per hour, but yet Highway 25 is 55 miles per hour? I had no idea why that is.
Well, I asked the same question, and what it is, I actually reached out to a trooper when this first took place, and I believe part of it was a study and a survey that they do, and throughout the results of that survey and the study that MnDOT and the state did, that's why they came up with it. Now, why isn't everything else the same? I believe at some point it may be the same. I think it just hasn't gone that far yet. So all highways may be at some point 60 miles an hour.
Thank you.
And then our total number of inmates. So Morrison County, we're averaging 44 inmates for the month of February. And I did a comparison in 2017, we were at 39, so it's gone up just a little bit. And then if you scroll all the way down to the total number of inmates, including our inmates that we get from outside counties, we're at 60 for an average. And in 2017, a year ago, we were at 49, so that has gone up a little bit as well. And then the next page are out-of-county inmates. Just to highlight that, we had 29 inmates that we housed from other counties. And the revenue collecting for out-of-county boarding inmates was $25,135. That's really all I have, unless there's any questions for me.
Questions, gentlemen?
Mr. Chair, Sean, we got to sit through your Alice training is what I'm going back to.
Okay.
We got to sit through a presentation out at Camp Ripley of the mall shooting in St. Cloud. And from the time the gentleman come in the door on the west side to when it ended on the east side, he stabbed 14 people and he was shot, and that took 4 minutes to run through that whole thing. So I can see where it's real important, and we got to see every camera, the way it hit, and it's just amazing at how fast this stuff happens. And what was more amazing, they brought us up to the fact where everybody was before they got called to this, that daily business was going on. And so I can understand where you need the training. And, when you take an incident like this and it happens in 4 minutes, it takes 4 minutes to get to some places. So it was very eye-opening, and I appreciated that. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Our own staff, our own deputies and officers that are doing this training, they do a good job. It's about 2.5, 3 hours of training. It includes the education part of it, which is the PowerPoint and the videos. So they kind of get somewhat of awareness of what to expect. And then they actually do the hands-on scenario where they actually take like Nerf guns, and they'll use these Nerf balls, and they'll simulate an active shooter. So it's one thing to see it and visualize it, but it's another thing to actually go through the training, hands-on, and go through that scenario-based training. So at the end of the day, the feedback, like I mentioned earlier, was positive, and there's a lot of people actually crying at the end of the training saying, I never thought I could do this, but I can, and now I know I can. So good feedback.
Sheriff, I'd like to make a comment on two things. One, I'll piggyback off of what Mike just said in regards to watching that video that St. Cloud presented to the EMS conference that we held at Camp Ripley, was the need for communications. Not that anybody's bad, right, wrong, indifferent. Things happen, and if you are not trained with that ability to take command, bring in your command post eventually, but simply just to have someone there to take command, it's how fast things just go and they're gone. It was truly amazing. The other thing I want to comment on is your ability to have your staff stop into schools and read to little kids. It's absolutely of an ultimate importance to have that uniform. They're good guys. To have them read, to get that interaction, I think it's second to none. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Further? Anything further, gentlemen? Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Moving right along, social services. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. All right, I have a couple items under the social services report. The first one being is a letter that our agency received, as well as Commissioner Jelinski, on the financial reporting for 2017 from the Minnesota Department of Human Services. And so just really wanted to commend our staff, Jim's unit, Linda and Deb in his unit, for perfect performance in submitting all of the reports to the Department of Human Services. And it is, they lead the effort, but it certainly is all staff participating because we all have to put our information into our information systems to make sure they can bill and submit the quarterly reports. So it's always nice to get these letters from the Minnesota Department of Human Services. So I just want to make note of that to the board regarding the work that our staff do. So,
Brad, I was pretty impressed when I got the letter. And I know it takes an entire team to get this job done. I truly do. But the state of Minnesota doesn't write a letter to everybody in the state to say, oh, boy, you did a good job, because everybody doesn't. And that's the purpose of what you're here for this item, because it needs to be echoed, and it needs to be echoed to all your staff on what kind of a performance this is and what it really truly means. So thank you.
all right, hearing nothing else, the next item on our agenda is a productive alternatives contract. And this is for 2018. This is funds already within our budget. This is a unique contract coming before the board because we are trying to create more unified contracts between Region 5. And this is one of those contracts that Charity Herbst, our contract specialist with National Joint Powers Alliance, has been working on. It's been a unique undertaking. It's been a challenging undertaking, but we have at least done this with one contract under productive alternatives where we are all under a similar format. As you can see, the rates are a little different. We are all trying to create a unique, or create rates that are consistent across the region as well, and we're going to be working towards that. This happens to be a service where we currently pay a little bit more. We pay $30 for a half a day, $50 for a full day. Deb is trying to get there quickly. And so it's one of the addendums. But these are some of the things that having a contract specialist certainly helps us with. Brian was able to see this contract before it was finalized. I'm not sure if he remembers it from last fall, but he was okay with it last fall. And so, but again, this is another opportunity with that relationship we have with NJPA and having one contract specialist that works with all of our providers across the region. So,
Mr. Chair, I'd imagine that that the difference in cost has to do with supply and demand in the areas and where the locations are of the service providers and such, correct?
not necessarily.
Oh, okay. Silly me.
I think it just depends upon counties, their willingness to negotiate, their willingness to understand the cost of a provider doing business and what they're willing to pay. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily because of where they are and the demand. Not that isn't taken into account, but I think that's one of the things we see on a statewide level is just kind of the difference in rates. We know there certainly is differences between metro and rural, but even in here in Region 5 amongst the 5 counties, just the difference in rates is not uncommon. And so these are some of the things we're trying to work through as we have one contract specialist that's working with all of our providers.
Have we found yet, having one contract specialist working with all 5 providers or all the providers, have we found yet a cost savings here?
I wouldn't say we found a cost savings from the provider standpoint, but I think from an organizational standpoint, it's helped us do better business with our providers, getting better data from providers, holding providers more accountable. And so I think that is what's the most important aspect of this relationship.
Okay.
So I'm here to bring this forward for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I look for a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion.
Should I abstain on this vote because I'm on that chair, or does it not matter?
No, I think you're fine.
I'm
I
okay.
don't think it matters at all.
This isn't a contract with NJPA, it's a contract with a provider that has nothing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Good
Just wanted to
question.
question it. Yep.
I guess that's my legal opinion, Brian.
Further discussion based upon what Brad just gave us? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
The next thing on the social services agenda is bringing forth for approval the conversation we had at planning last week regarding hiring temporary staff to support the work of the Family and Children's Unit. We are going to have 4 social workers on FMLA at one time from about May through August, some overlapping. Ultimately, for sure, 3 out at one time. And given the work of the Children's Unit and the requirements for visits and all of the other things that are going on, this is a unique circumstance that requires us to look for support for that unit. And so what we're bringing forth is a request to hire up to 2 temporary social workers to assist during FMLA leaves in the Children's Unit at Social Services.
Gentlemen, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, again, we had a great discussion on this at the last planning session, and it's the big thing here is we're talking about is child protection, and to me, it's just a necessity.
I can't do anything but agree with you. And my understanding is it's not going to be cost equal, but it shouldn't really be a big cost factor when the day's done.
Good point, Mr. Chair. Yes, if you look at just the dollars, it should be fairly even. However, that doesn't take into account revenue, other things that might play into this. So, but as we look at the cost, it looks like it should be neutral. And if there is added cost, we do have some fund balance to manage that.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
So the next thing I have on our agenda is a child care report. So this is a function of our agency in licensing child care providers in Morrison County. And so Melanie is here to chat a little bit about child care, the changes to child care, those kinds of things.
Morning.
Good morning.
Members of the board. I'm just doing really my first child care report ever. I don't think I've ever been to board about child care. You know, in all the years that I've been with the county, child care has been pretty static. Pretty status quo is kind of a rules kind of thing that we've really managed, and always had less than 1 full-time equivalent working on child care licensing. In recent years, I'd say within the last 3 to 4, there's been quite a bit of movement with childcare. A lot of federal requirements for additional training. Safe sleep was a big issue a couple years ago. That's still, I think, being felt by providers. And so one of the things that we're noticing, along with really the rest of the state, is a decline in the number of child care licensed homes. So that is, we're not talking about child care centers, we're talking about licensed child care that is done within a provider's home, or is small enough that it's not considered a center. You know, we do have a couple providers that will purchase a home outside of their own home, but it's really those small child care facilities in our county and really throughout the state that are declining. And they are clearly reporting it is due to the number of requirements. We do have some retirements that are occurring, but they are pretty vocal in saying that, you know, it's quite a bit of expectations and quite a bit of a change that it was from even 5 years and 10 years ago, where somebody could pretty easily get into the business. It's really becoming quite more of a business model with expectations. On page 2, I did go into a little bit of the legislative changes for providers, and that's just from this last legislative session. As I mentioned, this is kind of an add-on, and one of the things I was reflecting on this morning as I was preparing is this is just from this last legislative session. Providers have kind of experienced this for the last 3 years. It's a bunch of new requirements, a bunch of new requirements, and a bunch of new requirements. And so these now are focused on more specific training, health and safety training requirements. The emergency preparedness plan has to be much more spelled out, and they have to document times of drills. This was very new to all providers, and they have been asking us a lot of questions about what that means. The child care allergy information and the requirements around that, changing to their contract about pickup and drop-off times, and then also requiring the fingerprints. And I think there's something still moving through the legislature on that issue because they want fingerprinting done of all family members, and so I think that's still a point of discussion. And then the whole licensing system is moving to electronic format. And so there will be, when there's a correction order issued, that will be published on the DHS website.
So this has to do, a lot of this has to do with childcare, to where childcare is not inexpensive. Childcare is very expensive, and I've heard it a billion times, the lack of childcare.
Yeah.
And a good share of it, based upon what I'm hearing, is due to the fact that I'm not a babysitter anymore.
Yeah.
And perhaps it all started out a long time ago that way, but we're not babysitters anymore. You actually are, it's a childcare type thing, to where you have to follow these rules or you can't be in business.
Right.
And people are looking for this kind of stuff, and we just don't have a whole lot of it right now in this area. That's correct?
That's correct. There is a great demand for childcare. We hear that quite a bit. Families looking for a licensed provider. Excuse me. Typically, as you have younger children, you have to have less kids in your home, too, that you're caring for to account for that. So there's specified amount of limits that you can care for, infants or toddlers or preschoolers and school age, all those variation of numbers. And then also there's a cap on the total number of kids that you can have in your care.
So to go back just a little bit, if we're having a child care center in a house, and there's a family that's living in the house, that's what we're talking about, is to fingerprint the family.
Yes.
To make sure that we don't have anybody from XYZ involved in anything.
Yeah, and I think that is really a unique point about what makes childcare so unique, is that the family home, it needs to be licensed.
Yeah.
And that all the family members are considered as a part of that license and regulations. And really, there's not too many businesses like that.
Exactly.
And the intent is for safety. So, example, you don't have somebody in the home that has a history of violence or maybe sexual violence that would have exposure to the kids. So there's good intent behind that.
Certainly.
But it is a different model of business, and so that raises all kinds of questions about how that's set up.
And for parents, I think it feels intrusive to have your 13-year-old fingerprinted and have a background study done on your 13-year-old child. So I think that's one of the challenges with this business, is to fingerprint your 13-year-old child.
Absolutely.
So
Totally understand and agree.
So the legislative changes for the agency, now the agency has also been experiencing greater pressure, I think, in dealing with child care. I've thought a lot about more child care as a supervisor in the last 3 years than I have in a long time, just because there has been such progression of change and expectations and continual changing and demands for our staff and demands for training to understand the new recommendations and providers asking us questions. Most recently, the changes have really risen to the greatest level, and that is, we used to have 50% of our homes where we would do, they would come up for licensing every 2 years, someone's where they're licensed. And so we do a visit every 2 years and go through the extensive licensing paperwork. And really, now we have to have a visit every year. So at relicensing is almost the same as their annual licensing, really, because it used to be a lot less of a demand for relicensing. And so we have to have those unannounced, and it must be unannounced visits. So we used to call and set an appointment with the providers, and everyone could be prepared for what that visit was going to be. It was a little more efficient, one would say. Now they have to be unannounced, our visits, when we do our annual licensing. Annual licensing or relicensing visit. And the relicensing checklist has to be done electronically, and it is honestly just as long as the annual checklist. There really is no shortened format at this point. And then there is just a lot of expectations as for what happens at that interview. You may have to have an exit interview. We have to follow up with a letter. There's been a change in what they determine as a correction order. Now they've got a subcategory called fix-it tickets, which is also an electronic process. And so some things are fix-it tickets, some things are correction orders, and then there's follow-up that has to be done in both of them. So I guess I would just say there's just a lot more time involved in all of that. And then those results have to be posted on the DHS website. Also, providers call us and DHS to report any serious injuries or deaths or maltreatment. And like I said, the definition of annual was modified. And so when you look at the training, providers' understanding of when the training needs to be done by has changed. And so there's a lot of conversation with providers about when their training is actually done. So some of the time intensiveness has got to do with the rollout of these new changes, which would be the training and use of that electronic ELISI system, as well as educating providers on the unannounced visits, the new paperwork, and the new training requirements. So some of that is, just getting used to and managing some of this new information, but then some of it will just continue to be more time intensive. On the next graph, I just tried to do just a small capture of what the relicensing alone means for us as far as new requirements, as far as staff time. We estimate that initial licensing is about 10 hours, and this may increase slightly because of the technology. And then, of course, there'll be additional time for the leasing and the paperwork like I talked about. So I'm right now estimating about 35 to 40% increase in staff time to manage everything with the increase in relicensing demands for the annual visits and managing all of the new requirements. Right now, we have about 0.7 FTE allocated to child care relicensing, and so I'm estimated in order to manage everything that's coming at us, we probably need to bump that up to 1 full FTE for child care.
Mr. Chair, were we not utilizing a shared service model for something with child care licensing?
We are not currently.
Okay. We've talked about that before, though.
We have.
Okay. Thank you.
Good report.
So, yeah, and then just finally, the areas of need are recruitment, support and training. As I'd mentioned, childcare, from my perspective as children's services supervisor, is an essential service. There is nothing that I've seen that does a better job of preventing child protection issues. It's a solid child welfare program. It's valuable for economic development. It's valuable for many things. But what we're seeing, I think, as I just mentioned, that providers are going to need additional support, and we're going to need additional time for recruitment. So those are some of the worries that I have moving forward as we look at managing this program.
So as Deb said, there is some shared services opportunities. So really, this is setting a foundation for a conversation we'll have at planning next week around opportunities for a shared service with other counties in Region 5. But really wanted to give you a snapshot of where childcare is at and the issues we're experiencing. And I think how Melanie summed it up around economic development, health and safety of kids, getting them ready for kindergarten. As counties, we've been challenged at being able to utilize that. And so we're looking for other opportunities for childcare that we'll talk a little bit about next Tuesday at planning.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was at a meeting yesterday, and they were talking about child care, and one of the problems is that people can't cash flow this by what it's costing for child care, what it's costing them to have a business. A lot of them can't have it in their homes anymore because of all the requirements and stuff. So I think this is a big issue. There's people that cannot move around here because there's not enough child care to take care of the kids when they go to work, so then they stop working, and it's just a big circle. So I don't know how we get a handle on all this, but this doesn't sound, this is good regulations maybe for kids, but it doesn't help solve the problem.
Correct, yes.
Well, and then the next thing's going to come in will be affordable child care. And what is affordable? Of course, that brings an entirely different and another discussion to the table.
Yeah. And we have a friend who does childcare in North Dakota, and they're experiencing the same trends given the federal requirements around licensing. So this is not unique to just Minnesota, but it is really kind of the federal government looking at childcare in general and changing the rules, requirements, and expectations. And so it's trying to find that balance between safety for kids, regulations that keep kids safe, and trying to provide a service to the community and People years ago got into childcare because they had a child and thought, well, why not help out other parents at the same time? And now it's
Yeah.
difficult.
Just a lot more.
So,
Absolutely.
All right,
Good.
thanks.
Mel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're going to put a different hat on now?
I'm going to put a different hat on now.
Okay.
So the first board action request is to approve a seasonal establishment license for Silo Ice Cream in Motley.
Look for a motion.
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes.
And then I have two other application requests, and that is for consumption and display permit for the Ramey store for April through March, and a temporary 1-day to 4-day liquor license for the food shelf to hold an event at Falls Ballroom.
So moved on both.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask Karen and Cindy to come up here. And Commissioner Lemire, you'll get this twice. So we are going to do a report on our child and teen checkup program. And I think we have a child and teen checkup program that's been recognized regionally as well as statewide, given some of the things that Karen will talk about today. And maybe I'll have you introduce yourself just in case they all don't know who you are.
My name is Karen Ottman, and I coordinate the Child and Teen Checkup Program for Morrison County.
And so her and Cindy put together a nice presentation that is in your board packet that Karen is going to talk about. So
And Karen, you don't get to come here very often. That's why he said, I think you should introduce yourself. We see Cindy once in a while, but you
everybody
rarely
else
come.
knows her, but maybe though you guys up here don't know her.
So
So
thank you very much. So the slide 2, if we move on, the Child and Teen Checkup Program federally is known as the EPSDT program, but in Minnesota we call it the Child and Teen Checkup Program, and it's a required component under Title 19 of the Social Security Act. And so basically our program is for children birth through age 21, up to age 21, that are on the program. On the next slide, just a little bit of statistical information off the CMS 416 report, which is the most current information we have. We're just now submitting the reporting process for 2017. But for the number of eligible children enrolled in Minnesota in 2016 was over 591,000 kids in the state. For Morrison County, we were over 4,000 children available, and the state participation rate was at 72%, and for Morrison County, we were at 78%. And so the federal goal of the program is 80% participation, and so you can see the increase in numbers projected for 2018 for the state, being close to 640,000 or over that for the state, and for Morrison County, a continuous increase. And so we're looking at 4,425 children on the program. And just a quick note on this is that it's new families continuously coming on the program. As we're doing the reporting process for 2018, we had over 1,100 new children on the program. So these are families participating that have never participated before in the program. So our outreach is always ongoing to reach to these families and make sure they have the information. On the next slide, we put together a little bit of a report to include our CHB, comparably where our rates have increased and grown. And so I've been in the program quite a few years, but I went back to 2011 just to kind of give you an idea of the growth in the program and where we're at comparable to our other counties in participation and the state participation rate. 2015, they reevaluated the reporting process, and across the board, we all went down 2% as they looked at how we report these numbers, and then went back up to 78% here for Morrison County. So just an interesting fact, just an adjustment. I'm sorry the notes didn't change on your slide, but there are 91 county tribes listed on the CMS 416 report for Minnesota, of which there are only 17 currently that have a participation rate over 70%. So there's a lot of work that goes into that to see our numbers at the level that they are. As those numbers increase again, I would say in the last 4 years of growth, we're up about 1,800 kids on average at the same FTEs in the program. So again, we work really hard at what we do to get these families participating in the program. On the next slide explains a little bit of the components involved in a child and teen checkup. And so we require many components: hearing, vision, developmental, blood work, lab work when necessary. We're part of the MinVac program, Minnesota Vaccine. So vaccines are provided to the children, sports physicals. We collaborate with Early Head Start, early childhood, to make sure these kids get in, and we do the best we can. We work off on the next slide, it's called a periodicity schedule. At the federal level, the best practice is Bright Futures. And so in 2017, October 1st of 2017, our Child and Teen Checkup Program aligned itself with the Bright Futures periodicity schedule, which meant quite a few changes within our program, but in a very positive way. So on the next slide, it talks about some of those additions to the program now, or to the scheduled checkups. And so we worked very closely with our clinic to collaborate efforts in implementing these changes. And the importance to know is that during a child and teen checkup, they must meet the required components to bill out a full comprehensive child and teen checkup screening. So we don't want the clinics to have a lost revenue on not completing a full child and teen checkup, but the most important thing is the benefit of the children, that they get all the required components for a full comprehensive screening. The premise of our program is the earlier the detection, the earlier the intervention, the better the outcome, and the healthier the community. On the next slide, we talk about community partners joining together for a healthier community. And really, it does take all of us working together, public health, clinics, health plans, and our partnership with MDH and DHS in making this happen. And so again, this year, with the changes in October 1st of 2017, we collaborated with our health plan, with our clinic, just to note that our families can choose clinics beyond Morrison County, but we have a very high participation rate with our clinic here at the Family Medical Center, and they really are champions in the process of really working with us in a great collaborative effort. And so we always are looking at a public health viewpoint of quality improvement, areas within the program that we can do better, and outreach and working with the health plan. Just a really note to South Country Health Alliance, they offer great incentives to our families along the way for getting in and getting their checkups done, and that's a huge positive for our community. A couple years ago, on the federal level or the state level, MDH, DHS, and I was fortunate enough to be part of a project on a lean project for the Child and Teen Checkup Program, which was really a nice collaborative effort of really looking at what we can do to better improve the program, and with that came better reporting process. We've been able to look at that in the last couple years, but also support and training on the state level from MDH and DHS. Actually, MDH came in for our clinic training and did a phenomenal job. We had 25 in attendance to include docs, nurses, nurse practitioners, billing and coding. South Country Health Alliance came along to help. If it's not coded correctly at the clinic, it can't be billed out correctly. So it was a wonderful collaborative effort, and we manage that on a regular basis. It's really nice to work together in that way. On the next slide, again, just working together as outreach, collaboration, training, program sharing. We like to use the word advocacy to our families. We view ourselves that within the program as we're an advocate in their health care, making sure they receive the best services possible. On the next slide, one of our challenges that we continue to face is dental, and that was one of the changes within the program. It's now required within a child and teen checkup for fluoride varnishing up to the age of 5. And so we're hoping that that's going to help. You can see the numbers there, that the access to dental services is very minimal yet in our area. On the next slide, just an idea of what fluoride varnishing is, and it's a topical treatment, easily done up through the age of 5 years. It's very preventative to help decay in the young children's teeth. The bottom picture shows caries and some dental decay, which we see often, including in our WIC clinics here. So we're hoping it's very safe. It remineralizes, I can say the word. I apologize for decay on the teeth, and it's very effective. And so again, that's something new in our program that we're advocating for. For Morrison County, we do provide a dental provider update, again, and trying to bridge that barrier for our families. Currently, we do have Apple Tree Dental in Morrison County seeing our families, but they are on quite a waiting list. It's right now 8 months. And so many of our families are having to travel outside of our area to seek dental services. So currently, that's about a 50-mile radius that we do research to find dentists that will accept our MA population and out-of-county families. And so we work hard at that. Every 3 to 6 months, we update that and provide those for our families on a regular basis. So dental is a huge area that we focus in on here in Morrison County.
As Commissioner LeMaire heard last month, the Apple Tree Dental is continuing to try to increase the services available to improve dental access to those on medical assistance. So hopefully that will continue to improve. And just to shout out to Public Health and Karen and Cindy and South Country Health Alliance, we did host a meeting with the clinic and hospital staff
Yes.
January, February?
It was November.
November, see, time flies, November. Talking about the changes to the child and teen checkup and good conversation about making sure clinics and hospitals can bill the full rate for these early childhood checkups. And so we provided them a lot of information, and Karen's also come and talked with our child welfare staff about child and teen checkups, because there are added benefits for those kids who are in foster care to make sure that they have healthy futures, given the stress and challenges they've experienced with their moves. So
It does guarantee more than a yearly checkup for high-risk children. So if there's anything identified that is of a concern, they can be seen definitely more than once and is a paid source,
yeah,
which is huge for our at-risk families.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Very good information. Thank you.
Yes.
Questions,
Mr.
concerns?
Chair, Brad, Appletree, did they have more than one doctor, or is that where they're at right now?
They currently have 2 dentists,
Okay.
but they're not full-time. And so they're continuing to expand. So, but I still don't think they found a full-time dentist.
No, the report was that they're at 2 days a week for the most part, but what they did do is they increased the dental hygienist from 3 days to 5 days a week. And if someone comes in that has a real severe situation, she has the ability to do teledentistry and get a dentist to take a look in that mouth, and that person can be moved up on the priority list to be seen by the dentist. So it's sort of a pre-screening, and then just the hygienist available more provides more services to people that need the cleanings and hygiene done. So it's definitely improving. It's not where we want it to be, but we're getting there.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Next, I think we're going to keep Cindy, right?
We're going to keep Cindy, and Sarah's going to join us as well.
Here comes
So
Sarah.
we have one public health and social services report, and this is regarding our Min Choices activities at both public health and social services. And so Sarah and Cindy are going to talk a little bit about this program that, as we know, over the years has created challenges for counties in trying to manage a new assessment process around long-term care and those with disabilities. And so,
Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as you know, Min Choices is that person-centered comprehensive assessment that provides services. It's that one-size-fits-all assessment that we do from children all the way up to 100-year-olds. The questions are adjusted a little bit based on age. But that rolled out in 2014, and we continue to increase the numbers of people that were required to do a Min Choices assessment on. So it's basically the gateway so that anybody that is asking for services, whether it's PCA, private duty nursing, developmental delay case management, CADI case management, all the way to the elderly waiver and alternative care, all get that same assessment. So I'll let Sarah talk about where they're at for the social services stats.
So the graph below shows, the light green shows the new assessments. So those are people that do not receive waivered services or PCA services. Those are people that are new to the assessment process or new to the service. The blue is the amount of people that have to be reassessed, because every year a person that receives waivered services or PCA services has to be reassessed to determine their eligibility for that new year. And then the yellow is the refusal. So some people might be referred for an assessment, but then decide that they don't want one. And then the dark green is the total amount that we have done that month. So January 1st of 2017, the state mandated that all new and reassessments were to be done as Min Choices. Not every county was able to accomplish that. Morrison County was. So I think that's huge to the amount of work that was done between our two agencies, with our staff, with administration, with our case aid. It was a lot of work. And so so we, credit to all of those people. And then starting January 1st of 2018, there's a change with the county of residence. So before, the people that we have, that's our financial responsibility, that lives in another county, say in adult foster care or those kind of situations, our assessors would travel to do that reassessment. As of 2018, the county of residence is now responsible for that assessment. So we lost 63 assessments in that process for this year, but we gained 74. It reduced our drive time, but these are people we're not familiar with, so it's, it's new. We're not sure what it's going to look like. It could change from year to year, depending on people moving in and out. So not entirely sure what that looks like at this time.
And just one comment around that. This is one of those areas directors are keeping an eye on because not all counties are staffed appropriately, shall we say, for completing all their Minnesota Choice assessments. And so if we have somebody living in Duluth in a foster home, there are expectations that that person be reassessed by a certain day or they could lose their benefits. And so they might lose their PCA, their placement, if those counties don't get there and complete it on time, which would be similar for us if we don't get to those individuals that are living in our county on time for another county. And so I think there are pluses and minuses to this expectation and this new requirement around county of residence, but there's also some significant challenges or barriers that could occur as a result of that. So this is an area as directors that we like it, but we don't like it. And we'll see what happens.
And it's been a process and learning how to track those. We have to send notifications to that county to do our assessments. They have to send notifications to us. So just tracking purposes and figuring all that out has been a little bit of a challenge. But, we start those assessments this month. Even though it said January 1 of 2018, it really didn't take effect until about April. So we're going to see what that looks like starting now. And then in August of 2017, DHS required the implementation of the electronic support plan, which also included some significant training for all staff. So, like Cindy said, this started in 2014, and it's been ongoing changes, ongoing training, ongoing everything. So, every year is a new challenge to take on. So, Social Services has 3.2 FTE designated to MinChoices assessments. One full FTE is about 10 assessments per month. In the past 13 months, 11 of the months, we were over capacity for completing those assessments. In the 14 months, we were averaging about 33 a month. So our capacity is give or take around 32 a month. So, we'll see what these out-of-county changes do to our numbers.
So on the public health side, weekly, Sarah and I sit down and we look at the new assessments that have come in, and we kind of try to sort out who's best suited to do that assessment based on what kind of services they're seeking, as well as what the capacity is on that side. So in public health, we did 200 assessments over that period of 14 months. Some of those were new assessments, people that had not been on services, and some were, just like in social services, the annual reassessments. We're averaging 14 a month. We've increased our staffing just in the last couple of months. We had one person that was a 0.5 FTE doing the assessments who's gone up to a 0.9. And we're taking some of the assessments off the plate of the care coordinators because their caseloads are so high. One of the things that we hope to see result from that is that we could see increased revenue. The way we get reimbursed for these assessments is based on the random moment process. So an assessor could get an email saying, what were you doing at 11:59 on this day? If they happen to be working on MinChoice's work, they put that into the email and respond, and we can get what we would call a hit or get reimbursed for that. So the likelihood that we'll get more reimbursement by having somebody as a 0.9 almost doing this entirely is better, and we're hoping that'll increase our revenue. It's a little bit of a hit and miss. We never know exactly what we're getting until the quarter ends and quite a bit of time goes by, and then we get the payment without much explanation for who was doing what. So that's very, very challenging. We're averaging about the 14 a month with the 1.2 FTEs that we're using for that in public health. One other thing that's coming down the pipe, 2019, 2020, they're not sure. The whole MinChoices platform, the software is being reworked already.
Oh.
So it rolled out.
Given
it never
recent
really.
history, hopefully that goes a little better than other areas.
We do have one employee that is working in a pilot where she dual enters assessments, so she does it in the old format and then does portions of it in the new format, gives them feedback. I like this section, I don't like that section. We're hoping that by having a voice in that process that they'll listen to some of our suggestions for how to improve the product.
Good.
You can go ahead with the revenue.
And so the next graph is the revenue for social services. So you see in 2017, we budgeted for 39400. And you can see that we were actually over revenue, so we did better than we thought we were going to. And then in 2018, that is in blue is our budgeted revenue. And so obviously we don't have our actual revenue for 2018 at this point, but
And in public health, we went over last year by about 14,000 from what we had budgeted. And again, we increased our staffing in that area, and we're hoping to see an increased revenue based on how we're working that program with one person dedicated to it. So we really have an optimistic hope that we'll get better revenue out of it on our side this year.
And on the social service side, we've continued to see that growth in revenue. Our agency at Social Services has always been accustomed to the random moments and how we bill for this particular service. In 2014, when this program was started and public health was included, they weren't as familiar with the random moments and how to manage the random moments. And so as they've become better equipped and better understanding of that system, you can see the revenue is getting better than what has been budgeted. And as we said, having a staff dedicated to Min Choices generally does provide better revenue for the program because they are going to be doing that service when they get a random moment to complete. So we're continuing to hope to see the increase in revenue on the public health side, just as we have on the social service side moving forward.
Gentlemen, comments? I'll make one.
Thank you.
The pilot project is a pain in the hind end. I know that. Always is. But if we don't participate in a pilot project, we have no input at all.
Exactly.
Not that everybody's going to listen to what you've got to say, but the chances of whomever listening to something of what you've got to say because you're involved in a pilot project is huge. And I think it's a huge undertaking, and hats off to anyone that is involved in it because it is more work, without a question. But I think that the end result, dealing on a pilot project, is a win-win for everybody, and certainly is a win-win for Morrison County. So thank you very much for that.
And I think the other benefit, Mr. Chair, is the fact that staff will have more expertise in that system.
Without a doubt.
Especially when it gets rolled out. And so she can mentor other staff and have a better understanding of how that system has worked versus all 3, 4, 5 folks getting it at one time without much knowledge. And so that's the other benefit.
Exactly. So thank you very much.
That's all I have this morning.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we should take about a 5-minute pause. We're back, and we have Beth with us today from Extension, and you're on.
All right, well, happy spring. What does it start officially in about 45 minutes or something?
Anytime now.
Anytime when the snow is supposed to stop, spot on? No. So hello, everybody. A couple of things to kind of announce or what to say about or remind you about Extension of what we're up to. You can see Becky in 4-H is always busy. Emily does what Emily does, and Dan's days are numbered. So Friday is Dan's retirement party, just to remind you of that, and then he is officially done next Wednesday. It's his final day. I saw the paper wrote a nice article about his almost 30 years with Extension. From my portion of Extension, I've been busy working with a couple of our educators and state entomologists to bring some local programming. And as of right now, I only had 2 registered for the flyer that I provided for you guys on strategies to tackle pests in vegetable and fruit production. My focus here in this county is supposed to be on local foods, and I'm trying to bring programming here, but I need people to come to it. So I really could use your help to get the word out. If I can't make this stuff successful, it's pretty hard to convince those specialists and educators from the Metro to come up. So please help me get the word out on that. I'm trying. I've got flyers in Central Soda and in the bank and, in places. So let's hopefully that picks up. The other thing I've been spending a lot of time on is I'm on the board for the SFA, so Sustainable Farming Association, and our Salsa Fest event is going to take place again in Todd County in September. September 22nd is our date, and I got the exciting news that my idea brief that I submitted to RSDP, which is the Regional Sustainable Development Projects through the university, said, yes, now we want a full project proposal. So this is where, if that goes through, then there would be funding potential, and not just funding, but resources. So as I'm only 5 hours a week here in the county, I can only get so much done to try to promote local foods in our area. So fingers crossed, that's what I was working on as I was waiting for my time over there, jotting some notes down because I have a conference call at 11 o'clock. So I will make this quick. With that group, it's really just focusing on bringing the growers and any other local vendors who want to be a part of a great celebration to rural Minnesota. So mark the calendars for that. I hope to see you guys there. And maybe I'll see some of you on Friday at Dan's retirement. But I don't know if you have heard, the interim is confirmed. So Randy Pepin, who was the educator in Todd County, and he's been with the university on special projects for the last handful of years, will start April 2nd. So that will be the following Monday after Dan's retirement. So I know he's already been attending some meetings with Forge Council and things so that there's a smooth kind of transition for the summer months until we hire the full-time replacement.
Very good, thank you.
Any questions?
Anything further, gentlemen? Beth, thank you very, very kindly. Our next item on the agenda is land services.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So if I talk as fast as Karen did, it will be 2.5 minutes long.
She does have a special talent of very fast speaking yet articulate and clear.
Very
And
good.
I'm here in case she passes out from not being.
No doubt about it.
Right?
So no, what we want to do is the valuation statements and tax statements are going out soon. And so we wanted to give you a little bit of an update as far as what's going on in the county as far as for values and all of that. So you have an idea of what's happening. So when those go out and if you happen to get any calls, you'll have a little bit of background information. So Jean put together some general information for you. And then of course, if you have specific questions, feel free to stop into the office.
So she's just given part of my report. She's no longer allowed to talk before me.
That was just the opening.
So just wanted to give you an update on the estimated market value changes for the 2018 Pay 19. Those notices are going to be going out before or on March 30th. So thought this would be a good time just to kind of update you in case you get any phone calls once those notices go out. Just a brief review of the process that we have. All the sales that take place in the county comes through our office. Each appraiser in those jurisdictions look at those sales, and they determine if they're good sales or if they're rejected sales. Rejected sales are going to be your bank sales, your relative sales. And once those have been gone through, they're verified with the current property owner to any changes that might have happened on those, or any circumstances that might have given it, they may have paid more or paid less because of certain things. And that's just information that we need to know so that we can make a good assessment. Then once those have been verified, then they are sent down to the Department of Revenue. And the Department of Revenue monitors everything that we do. So they require our median sale to be between 90 and 105%. So that means if the sales are coming through and my median sale is at 85, I need to increase the values so that it does go over 90. If it's at 110, I need to decrease all the values. So currently in Morrison County, there's a very strong market for the residential and seasonal. And so on an average, we are going up anywhere between 5 and 15% in our townships and cities. So
For
there's-
residential values. is
For
what you're saying.
residential values, and that is only on the building portion. Now, we have a couple of areas that have been really strong, and that is Bellevue Township, and, I love it, Randy.
Looking at you.
Bellevue and Two Rivers Township. And
What
those-
township do you live in, Jean?
I'm going to be going up as well. But that is a little bit more closer to the 20%. We just had some really strong sales in that area. One point of interest that I wanted to bring up was Pike Creek. This year, I was at 70% of the market, and I had 7 sales, and every one of them were low. They were close to that 70 mark, which meant to get even to 90, I had to go up over 30%. So what I did was I went up 24%, which only gave me a ratio of 86%. However, I have talked to my property tax compliance officer through the department, and he has said that he will not go for a state increase. However, he's not the one that makes that final decision. I have not heard of anyone going up that high that they've given a blanket increase. So I'm going with my PTCO officer and hoping that, because with 7 sales, it's hard to go up that much because, next year it might be different. Those 7 sales might be a different ratio.
Mr. Chair, if I could just piggyback on a little bit, just as a reminder for all of us. One, market value isn't directly correlated to taxes. So when people hear there's an increase of 5 to 10%, it doesn't mean necessarily taxes are going up, because keep in mind, if everybody's value goes up, that tax is spread the same, really, as what it is. It's those differences. And the second thing to keep in mind when Jean says the state may not do a state increase, they can override that decision locally that's made, or that practice that local assessors are doing, and they can say, nope, you have to do this because this is where the requirement is. And so just as a clarification point, that's what we're referring to, correct?
Correct.
Yes, and Jean has
If I
done
may,
a-
Debbie, it's the levy that sets the tax.
It's the levy that
Right.
sets how much money we need, and it's the values that determine who pays how much money we need. And so it's relevant, certainly. People see an increased value. I think there's an assumption automatically that your tax is going to correlate with that and increase automatically. It's not necessarily the case. Depends upon what's happening to every property. Depends upon what's happening to every other facet of properties or types of properties.
And we've had situations where we have gone up a substantial amount of money, but the levies have either stayed the same or have gone down. And in that case, their taxes would actually drop or stay the same. So it doesn't, it does not correlate. But I will tell you that people will get excited when they see that their total tax, their value has gone up 24%. And there's a couple other areas. It's difficult with townships that have lakes in it, because currently our lakes have been pretty stable. Off lakes have gone up quite a bit, for the exception of there's some in Richardson. There was Platte Lake is going up quite a bit, just because we have sales that show that we need to go up there. So,
and I think it's such an interesting thing for property owners to understand, or to appreciate, perhaps, that their value is correlated to what's happening in the market. It's what people are paying. It's what people are selling property for. And so it's not a fabricated amount. It's not something that's not relevant to current times. It's the market and what people are paying for properties that really drives all of that.
We had one appraiser when I was going through. I went through all the numbers with the appraisers, and I had one that literally went back on the computer, looked at the properties that were for sale, because he said, this is too much. This is just too much of an increase. And he went there and he compared what our value was to their asking price. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get that asking price, but what is out there that's available, and what are they asking for it? And he said, boy, are we low. So even after some of the significant changes, we are still low.
And that's part of an equitable assessment, is looking at that sales data and then adjusting like properties according to what the market is dictating. The other thing is Jean has been working very closely with the state, knowing kind of what the situation is with some of these townships and the sales, and that we aren't going to be within their target ratio for some of these. But I think working closely with the state and letting them have that insight into what we're doing, why we're doing, what we're seeing, will help when that is evaluated by the state as far as for a state increase. We're hoping that that insight will help with that.
And for the majority of the time, I like to stay in that 96 to 98 range. When I said that the Two Rivers and the Bellevue had gone up quite a bit, I'm in the lower 90s, so 92 versus 96 or 98, just because I went up so much on the buildings. So the only one that I'm out of compliance with, and I know that, is the Pike Creek.
And Mr. Chair, if I read it, and you're saying buildings, you're not saying agriculture, land?
No, correct. The building, the Bellevue, and see, it's very detailed. So it's hard to give you a general, because a lot of it is detailed. So when you're talking Bellevue and Two Rivers, it's just building value. When you're talking Pike Creek, it's going to be total building and land value. Now, on the agricultural has been very stable, and that has not, the cropland has not gone up. We're keeping that the same. The only change that I've made there is that wooded land is going up by about 5%. So very, very little on the agricultural side right now. Just, prices are just not where they're, crop prices aren't where they are. And
Jean, you mentioned 3 townships, Two
Yep.
Rivers, Bellevue, Pike Creek.
Yep.
That certainly doesn't mean that if you live in another township, that your valuation isn't going to go up or down.
Right, those were generally speaking, the
notable
the
ones.
5 to 15%.
Okay, very
So
good.
the majority of them will be going up. It's just, those were the ones that were
Yep.
standing out a little bit more with just the values.
And Mr. Chair, keep in mind the lag time too. The sales were based on sales in what year again?
2016, the last 3 months in 2016 and the first 9 in 2017.
Yeah, and so there's that lag time, and I think it seems like it's somewhat easier for property owners to understand that lag time when things are going up. It's a little bit more difficult when things are going down, because those values take a little bit to catch up, and we certainly want to see that impact that often is perceived as more positive with decreasing values in some regards, because decreasing taxes would be perceived as happening too. So I think an increasing market is more understood by people, it seems like, but who knows?
You're right, yes.
Didn't we get some estimates back in January or something on our property tax? Is that,
We got the proposed taxes for the 2018 taxes.
so were those increases on there, or were they not?
No.
Remember
no, this
those
is
truth and taxation
different
notices
things.
that go out in November? It's really about how our levy is going to impact property tax payments in that next year. It's about the levy, it's questioning how much money we're spending, it's not about values.
And when you have your board in June, those were the numbers last June. Those were the numbers that you seen there. And then those were placed for taxes. So those were 17 values paid in 2018.
So remember, we send the valuation notice and the tax statement together. So what Jean is talking about is the valuation notice for 2018 pay 19 is what she's speaking to today.
And when will that come out again?
It should be going out before or on March 30th. I believe statutorily it needs to go out on the 31st, which is a Saturday. So I'm assuming that they will be going out before that Friday. So if you're going to get phone calls, I thought about taking a week off.
Just clear your schedule for that weekend, so.
It is what it is.
Be that commissioner in Bellevue Township.
Right? I hate to live in Bellevue Township when your name is at the top of that, letter.
Exactly. Well, good information.
Yeah, so if you do have anything specific on your townships or cities and you want to know more information, just let me know. As well as if you get phone calls, we're always there. We have the sales to back up the information or the increases that we're doing.
Yep.
And so, we don't do anything without those sales. So, having them come in, having them talk to the appraiser is what we want.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Amy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot. And Ms. Gruber, it looks like you're going to be maybe next, huh?
I am. I am filling in as the auditor-treasurer these days. The requirement in front of you, or the question in front of you, is to approve some licenses. The Scandia Valley First Response Team is holding bingo on March 25th and November 18th at the Scandia Valley Town Hall. The Pheasants Forever is holding a raffle on September 14th at the Ballroom. And Morrison County Ducks Unlimited is holding a raffle on April 27th.
I would look for a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Right, and included in your board packet is the monthly cash balance report that Steve Messerschmidt puts together, just to give you an idea on where we're sitting in terms of cash balances and activity when it comes to tax collecting and payments going out.
It looks like we're in the plus, right?
Yes,
Good
we are.
sign.
It's always a positive thing.
Positive thing.
And that's it for that report.
That's it for that piece. And there is Mr. Bukowski. Steve, good morning.
Oh, Mr. Chair, you know what? Because
excuse
I'm
me.
not used to it warrants, we should do that.
Oh,
Motion to pay the bills.
Yeah,
all
we
of
have,
them.
I'll second that, yeah.
motion and a second to pay the bills. This is a roll call vote. Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lemire.
Aye.
Commissioner Wincher.
Aye.
And myself, aye.
Thank you. Sorry about that, just not used to
No,
the time.
yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. A number of items for your consideration today. The first is reflective of a presentation that was made both at a Public Works Planning meeting where we had discussion and the last county board planning meeting here at City Hall, where you directed me to draft a resolution authorizing the repeal of wheelage tax. I included the presentation from the planning committee and would like to just maybe quickly cover that. In 2013, we had presented to the county board issues that we had in deteriorating and failing culvert pipe. There was a backload within our system. The county board, or the state legislature earlier had authorized counties to implement a wheelage tax, so it was a new tool that was available to the counties. The county board considered and debated that issue, and on July 23rd, authorized a resolution to implement a wheelage tax for the calendar year 2014. So the result of that program was that we had constructed a substantial number of culvert projects, both under contract and with county forces, needed projects of deteriorated and failing drainage structures across the county. I presented some pictures of what we were finding out in the field and some of the examples of the results of the projects that we utilized the money for.
And with that,
And then we have the contract listing, the contracts, both under contract and force account for your review was just under $1.8 million is what we're anticipating the years the wheelage tax has been in place will generate. We also had discussed some successes that we had in obtaining outside revenues that had not been contemplated when we were looking at deficiencies in funding for road and bridge. The local road improvement fund for the airport extension was additional funds that had not been considered. Other funding sources that are available to the department are tending to be rising higher than what we had anticipated when we had presented that earlier and the sales tax was implemented. And so with that, we requested direction from the county board on what you'd like to do as we proceed with wheelage tax, and drafted the resolution that is before you for consideration. This needs to go to the Department of Public Safety. It is implemented through the tab fee when you register your vehicle, and so we need to give them notice if you wish to terminate collection of the wheelage tax. before August 1st, and so that is why we had presenting it this early for the year. And so I turn that over to you, Mr. Chairman, for your discussion.
First of all, I look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, and I think we should have some discussion.
Well, Mr. Chair, we had a lot of discussion at our past meeting, our planning session about this, and we also had a discussion at Public Works about it. And again, we brought this up, I believe, in 2013, as our county engineer said. It has served its purpose, and I just, to make it short and sweet, let's give that money back to the residents of Morrison County and move on.
In 2013, there was a need. There was a big need, and that was the direction that we had from the legislature. They weren't giving us the money. That was our tool to do it, and that's why that was enacted. At least that's my opinion of it. And as you said, Commissioner, that project's been taken care of, and there's been other funding sources that have come in. So the answer is perhaps let's give it back. So that's a good discussion. Gentlemen?
I would agree with what you both have said without saying it again.
Same here.
So without any other further discussion, those in favor of removing the sales tax effect, or wheelage tax, excuse me, which would in essence be effective January 1st, 2019, because we still have to pay it through 2018. So those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Steve, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say from an organizational standpoint, being responsive to the needs of the organization, implementing funding sources that are necessary, and then removing those when unnecessary is very good leadership. And just from a staff perspective, I appreciate that from the county board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item for your consideration, we earlier had requested authorization to continue our calcium chloride application program for 2018, and that we would solicit proposals for that application. We did that, and we received 2 proposals, one from Tri-City Paving and one from Northern Salt. And Tri-City Paving is the lowest responsible bidder at $95,767.45, and our request is that the board would authorize contract 1804 in that amount.
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion in regards to the calcium chloride?
I see that went down a little bit because you're not doing my one road, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that's an award of contract, so that's a roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire?
Aye.
Commissioner Wincher?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
And myself, aye. That motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Our third request for board action is relative to our seasonal supplies. We solicited quotes from contractors for equipment rental rates, bituminous material, and calcium chloride application. The calcium chloride application in this situation is minor applications where we may use a stretch of gravel road, could be on the township system for a haul road, and we apply calcium chloride during that period of time. So it's not the main big contract, it's for minor applications. The prices were included. We saw either prices staying the same or minor increases in equipment rental rates. On the bituminous, they stayed the same as last year. And calcium chloride did go up. I believe it went up about 4 cents. Our request is that the board would accept all proposals, authorize the department to use these as we see in the best interest of the county.
Look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Discussion. I have a little discussion. On the bidders, you've got Hool Excavating, Machi Construction, Marvin Treader, Sarah Backhoe and Gravel, Tri-City Paving. That's to utilize all of those businesses is in this motion. Is that correct? Or
Well, yes, we could, depending on if we need it, and Tri-City may be the higher bidder, but they're the ones that have that equipment for that particular project at that particular time, we would utilize them.
Okay,
So
that's
we have discretion, we'd use our discretion on which one and when.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, understood. And any further discussion? This is also a roll call vote. Commissioner Wincher?
Aye.
Commissioner Lemire?
Aye.
Commissioner?
Aye.
Thank you. And myself, aye. Tongue-tied there, sorry. That motion passes.
Mr. Chairman. Again, at the last planning meeting, we discussed the corridors of commerce and the proposal and a concept for an interchange on US Highway 10 in the city of Royalton. I did see in the paper, Commissioner Wincher and I had attended a city council meeting in which, following a presentation by a MnDOT representative, the council voted 5-0 to provide a support letter for this concept. Following that, I think there was some change of heart potentially. They called a special meeting. They debated this again, and at that meeting it passed on a 3-2 vote from what I read in the paper. So that was the City Council of Royalton's 2 shots at this. Now we will also need to take action on this. It is a concept that was presented with not a lot of information, but we have some real safety issues on US Highway 10 through Royalton. We have for a number of years. And essentially the concept that's being proposed is somewhat similar to what is in the city of Rice. They come up over Highway 10. They're providing access off one side of the highway. What was presented the night we attended the council meeting was that the westbound existing US Highway 10 would become a service road for those businesses and homes along that side. Between the existing highway and the railroad tracks, what is currently existing there would have to be removed under the concept that was presented. So it is, I drafted this resolution following our discussion at the last planning meeting. It is a resolution of support, and I present that for your debate and consideration.
Gentlemen, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
If I may, Mr. Chair, there's a photo in our packet here. Again, and Steve can probably make a comment on it too. That was just kind of like something that I believe they put together in the last couple of days. This photo that they have here really doesn't mean that that's how they're going to proceed. It was just someone's idea. And also, if you look at it, and I'm looking through this, I believe, again, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, there was $400 million roughly designated this out of $5 billion that were submitted. So again, this is something that, what's the chances it may be picked or may not? I don't know if you...
Based on this, this program's been in place for a number of years. They have built projects under the Corridor of Commerce program. This is probably the largest amount that it's been funded. Based on how they have done this in the past, though, this project rates quite highly in their method of determining their projects. There's 7 criteria that they go through. They did some test runs on them, so it rates quite highly to qualify for the funding. The question had been asked by Commissioner Jelinski on whether the option to back out of this existed, and there were a couple of second cracks you'd have got at it. The first would have been a cooperative agreement requirement if we had cost participation in the project. Well, when Commissioner Wincher and I attended that meeting, MnDOT came forward that this was a 100% MnDOT project. They were funding corridor commerce projects at 100% instead of 90-10 or some other percentage. So unless there is something that we're asking for outside of what they would have done, there won't need to be a cooperative agreement with the county. If there's utilities and other costs like that, there will need to be a cooperative agreement with the city. The other second chance really is more with the city of Royalton, in that there is something called municipal consent. And when you bring a state highway through a town like this, they expect that they work with the city, and the city is in support of the project. And so it's expected that the city will have a municipal consent ability as this moves forward if it turns in a way that they don't want it. But it could be that we don't have a second crack at this.
At the end of the day, this is really Morrison County supporting the project.
It's supporting the concept that we need to do something in Royalton to improve movement of traffic for goods and services and safety.
Correct.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, it's a great point that Steve brought about this municipal consent. And I'm under the understanding with the city of Royalton, there may be costs, but again, that's only if they do new improvements, let's say that their road, the bridge is going through or whatever, and they want to put city water in it, or city sewer. If they leave everything alone, the odds are they probably won't have to pay anything either. Again, I know it's a little gray area, but that's my understanding of this.
That would be the cooperative agreement on payment, but the municipal consent usually is the plan approval. Even if there weren't any cost to it, they should have a second crack on how the thing is designed.
Further discussion, gentlemen?
They kind of need our approval to go forward with this, don't they?
What this does, if you don't pass this, one of the criteria is community consensus. Yep. And so that would not rate very highly if the board didn't pass this. Mm-hmm. So the project probably would not meet the threshold, so it would be funded.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Anything further? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then the last item for your consideration, something we've been working on for quite a long period of time, working towards regional park and trail designation for our Sioux Line Trail. We went through a master plan process in which several members of the community were appointed, along with Commissioner Jelinski and Commissioner Wilson. We met several times, discussed projects and improvements on the Sioux Line Trail that were important to those members of the committee. We went forward once we had a draft master plan, soliciting input through our internet site and comments from the general public. We held an open house so people could come and see what the master plan looked like and what we were proposing. We had a number of people come and attend that. Then the master plan was approved by the board. We took the master plan then and moved it forward to the Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission, which has a process in which you kind of marry your master plan to the questions and strategies that they have for regional trails across the state. And this is a reflection of that. And so what we're asking is the board adopts this resolution so that we can submit that, and they will evaluate our master plan and what we're wanting to do and how it fits into the overall trail system of the state of Minnesota and their strategy. And if we are successful, they would designate it as a regional trail, which then opens up our ability to make application for legacy money to make improvements to the Sioux Line Trail.
Gentlemen, I would look for a motion.
That's so moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion. Any?
Well, we've talked about this before, but we need to have this plan in order to get any money to continue the trail. If I'm not mistaken, we're looking at about 30 miles of trail through Morrison County that would connect everything from the south to the north, right? And that's the piece that needs to be filled in. And by applying for this, we'll be eligible to get money to help finish that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think it's very important, Commissioner, I think it's extremely important. This has been started years and years ago and garnished the support of county boards well before us, and not only here, but throughout the entire state of Minnesota, and who knows beyond that, to put these trails together. So
some of the things that are, that we're looking at is some of these loop trails and mud runs so that four-wheelers have more than just that straight shot on the existing trail, trying to improve it and make it, I guess, more friendly and for more people to want to use. We're also included, one of the bigger things from my perspective is the 16 bridges across this trail are a very expensive kind of thing that we have to deal with. And this is over 100 years old since this was constructed. And by not finding outside resources for those really makes it somewhat impossible to continue to operate the trail. There's got to be maintenance type projects and those kind of rehabilitation and improvements. That's where I think my focus would be, to make sure the bridges are safe and that we can continue to operate.
exactly. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thanks, Steve.
Excellent. Yeah, if that's all Steve has, that means Ms. Gruber, we're back to you again.
Yes, I
Little
have a
administration.
Couple of action items. The first one I want to talk about in request is the reappointment, for Celia DeGroot to the Morrison County HRA for another term.
Look for a motion.
Also move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Perfect, thank you. I have one more action item, but we'll hold and wait on that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, until after the schedules. But aside from that, it's been very active legislative session, and so that's been keeping me incredibly busy. And the building project, we had a construction meeting since I've last seen you, where we met with the relative or appropriate contractors at the time. Every other Wednesday we have those. Very interesting, went and took a look at the building. The 70s building is one that we anticipated more questions on than others due to the lack of plans that existed. It's funny, we were in there and, I can't add extreme value to the conversations. However, it's very interesting to listen to the discussions regarding how unlevel the floor is, for example. And while we knew there was some issues that existed going, on the north and the south side of the building, we didn't know that it was existing throughout the building from east to west in terms of the floor level, or lack thereof, a level floor. And so those kinds of things bring up new issues and new discussions that we have. Nothing that hasn't been able to be worked through, but poses some challenges, but continues on. And they're busy. R&H Drywall is in there now. Last I saw, they whip up steel frames pretty quickly, and how that goes. And so that's coming to form. It's very interesting to see. And again, we'll try to get folks in there to take a look at the progression. I think that helps with employees understanding what's happening and not as much fear of those changes. And so that's been good discussion and interesting to see come about. Other than that, again, I have a closed session resolution, if we could entertain that after schedules, and then we will entertain or enter into closed session and then reconvene following.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, let's talk about schedules, and I'm going to need schedules from March 25th through the 31st. Commissioner Lemire, you're going to get to go first this time.
What was the date, Toll?
The 25th to the 31st.
The first week.
Oh, and then, sorry, and April 7th actually is the ending date. Sorry.
26th, Planning Commission, 7 p.m. 27th, Morrison County HRA, 8:30. Planning session, 8:30. And the state auditor review, 10:30. 28th, Public Health, 5 o'clock p.m. 29th, the CHI Health Assessment. That's the St. Franciscan room at St. Gabriel's Hospital. The 3rd, we have a board meeting at 9 a.m. The 5th, I got Initiative Foundation about housing at 6 p.m. at the Initiative Foundation. That's all I got.
Okay. Commissioner Wincher?
I believe we have, I think we should be good. Do we match up? On April 3rd, do we not have a Board of Adjustment at 7 p.m.?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then there's a Leadership Summit meeting at 1 o'clock, and I think that's up at Grandview Lodge or something like that.
AMC?
AMC, yep.
When is that one, Randy?
It starts at noon to 1 is registration at the Leadership
what day?
Summit. That's on the 4th of April. And the 5th.
And the 5th and the
6th, so it runs all those days there. Yeah, Grandview Lodge up north in Nisswa. Okay, and then on the 6th, I have a TSWAC meeting at 8:30. I don't know if you didn't say that one, did you?
No.
Ready? Okay. Then you got me, I got them all in.
Commissioner Wilson?
Got to give me a second. I was putting that in and I lost it all. I've got South Country on the 29th. Council of Aging on the 5th of March. And did we say TSWAC on the 6th?
Yep.
Okay.
Council of Aging, what time is that?
10 o'clock in the morning.
That it?
That is it.
Okay. On the 26th, I've got Stand Up For You at 5 o'clock. You don't care about taxes, do you? No, I got that taken care of. On the 28th, 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got Central Minnesota Emergency Service Board. And at 1 o'clock, I've got the full board. On the 30th, I've got an EMS Joint Powers Board meeting, and that is at the Service Center in Waite Park. On the 4th, I have a Central Minnesota Emergency Services Board Executive Committee meeting scheduled. On the 5th, I have an Armor Legislative Committee conference call scheduled at my house, and that should do it, I believe. I think. That being said, we need to close our meeting.
We do. The resolution in the board packet would be what I would like considered, and it's closing the meeting based on 13D.05 subdivision 3B, which allows us to be able to close a meeting by attorney-client privilege reasons. And the issue at hand is the Nash versus the Morrison County. Richard Knapp.
Do we need a motion for this?
Yep, you need to vote on the resolution if you could.
Thank you. Motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of closing the session for this attorney-client privilege thing?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. We will close our meeting at 11:29.
Yes.